I was on my way to the meeting about my late husband's estate when it happened. My hand hovered over the car key, the engine whispering to life, when a voice pierced the calm morning. "Ma'am, don't start that car." I turned slowly. A man stood there, coat worn and face lined by hardship, eyes sharp yet unsettled. He held a piece of paper like it was a detonator. My name stared back at me from it, forged, signed, claimed, and it wasn't mine. "I am Eleanor Harris. I am 67, live alone in the home my husband Daniel and I built together 4 decades ago. I make my morning tea with ritual care. I fold my linens precisely. I thought I knew my son Adrian. I thought I had raised a man of integrity. That morning that illusion shattered. The man on the curb didn't beg or plead. His voice quivered with urgency. He copied your power of attorney. Filed it last week. Paid cash, said you couldn't come in. I don't know him, ma'am. But you should see this." I left the car engine silent. The sun had yet to climb fully and sweat prickled beneath my scarf. I looked down at my polished shoes and realized I was trembling. The paper in my hands bore Adrian's name as the recipient and a signature so precise it almost fooled the eye. But it wasn't me. Not the way I signed, not the way Daniel used to joke it curled like a musical note. This was deception, a performance, a son masquerading as someone he was not. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I folded the page and tucked it into the inside pocket of Daniel's old gray coat, the one with his initials stitched into the cuff. I turned back toward the house. The man didn't follow, but he said quietly, "He shouldn't be deciding where you live." And just like that, I knew this wasn't a routine meeting. This was an ambush aimed at erasing me. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and faint lemon oil from the night before. I sank onto the bench by the window. The silence felt alive, not empty. Daniel had always said, "Let the quiet strengthen you, don't let it bury you." I reached for the drawer where we kept the original legal documents. All of them were intact, filed and untouched. I held the envelope containing the original power of attorney, signed by Daniel and witnessed by our old friend Judge Merrick. Daniel had never trusted digital copies. I had teased him for it once, never imagining I'd be grateful for his caution. But now I could almost feel him beside me, Daniel's thin hand tapping my shoulder like an echo from the past, as if to say, "I told you." "Ink over pixels, Eleanor," he seemed to whisper. I rose, leaving the car behind. This time I walked. I needed the earth under my feet, the uneven cracks in the sidewalk, the caw of an early bird, the ache in my knees. All of it reminded me I existed, that I still belonged to myself. When I finally reached the building where the meeting was set, the receptionist glanced up, surprised. "Miss Harris, you're early." I simply nodded. Crossing into the conference room, I saw him, Adrian, laughing mid-sentence with the estate agent, back turned. When he turned and saw me, the color drained from his face and he froze. Back at home, my fingers brushed against the inside pocket of Daniel's gray coat, where the forged document now lay pressed against the soft flannel. That simple, familiar touch brought me somewhere I hadn't dared to go in months. It was late, almost midnight. The hospital corridor had that surreal hush, the kind where even the beeping machine seemed to bend respectfully around you, knowing loss is near. Daniel was sitting upright, eyes still sharp despite the months in bed. His voice was gravelly but steady as he handed me a folder. Inside, resting lightly, was his old Parker pen, the one he claimed wrote straighter than any lawyer's signature. "You know where everything is," he rasped. "But this is the pension. The retirement account. I left instructions, but I trust you to do what feels right." I sat beside him. The beige curtain pulled softly around us, shielding the world. For a fleeting moment, I was back decades earlier in our living room, arguing about whether rosemary or hydrangeas would look better by the window. "Daniel," I whispered, I don't want this. I want you. He took my hand, dry warmth against mine, and tapped my wrist lightly where my watch had once rested. I know, he said, but you'll need this when I'm gone. Then he did something unexpected. He revealed another sheet clipped to a single-page letter, followed by a one-page banking form. I set aside part of the pension for ALS research, he murmured. Not in my name. Just quietly. No one's claimed it yet. I blinked. Why not tell Adrian? His face didn't harden or soften. It simply settled into calm. Not everything good needs an audience, Eleanor. Not everything quiet is weak. And I knew you'd understand it better than he ever could. That line stayed with me, echoing even now as I stood in our foyer, coat on, keys untouched on the hook. Daniel had trusted me, not just with finances but with meaning. Adrian never asked about the folder, never questioned Daniel's wishes. His eyes only sought the estate, the assets, the tangible claims. I walked down the hall toward our bedroom. Daniel's slippers were tucked beneath the dresser, exactly where he had left them before hospice. I knelt not ceremoniously but because my knees surrendered. I wept quietly, the kind of weep that folds you in like a small creature curling into itself. I pulled the Parker pen from my pocket, uncapped it, and wrote a single word on the back of an envelope. I asked myself. Then I crossed it out. Because I already knew Adrian hadn't always been this way. He'd been shy as a boy, restless as a teen, determined as a man. But somewhere between marriage and money he changed. He began speaking to me like I was an obstacle, not his mother. Daniel had noticed it too but never said a word. He left hints instead, quiet ones. The small ALS grant, the copy of the power of attorney that was never meant for Adrian, the handwritten note taped to the back of the safe. Some things aren't meant to be divided. Some things are meant to be honored. I had ignored the signs, thinking that if I loved Adrian enough he would return to me. But love isn't a lever you pull to move someone. You hold it. You let it speak when words can't. I stood, placed the pen gently back into the pocket beside the forged document and made a choice. I would go to the lawyer, not as a confused, tricked woman, but as Daniel's wife, as the steward of his intentions, the person he trusted to do what was right. I would go not to protect myself but to protect what truly mattered. Not just property but principle. The coat hung heavy on my shoulders. I hadn't changed my shoes. I walked past the grandfather clock, past the soft ticking of its brass hands and into Daniel's study. My study now, I supposed. Hallway light spilled across the desk. I didn't turn on the lamp. The silence was enough. I picked up the house phone, the same cordless receiver Daniel had refused to replace. Taped to the back was a number in his handwriting. Jacobson Direct. I dialed. My fingers were steady. 2 rings. Then a voice. Jacobson. Careful. East Coast clipped. The kind of voice that bends for little. Mr. Jacobson, this is Eleanor Harris, I said. Pause. The kind that says, I didn't expect this. Or perhaps it may already be too late. Mrs. Harris. I'm so sorry for your loss, he said. Thank you, I replied simply. We waited. Silence had always been our unspoken rule. No small talk when there was fire behind the door. I need to ask about a power of attorney, I said. One that may not be valid. The pause stretched. I heard him exhale slowly. I was going to call you, he admitted. But I didn't think it was appropriate yet. Adrian submitted a transfer request to the court regarding Daniel's joint estate assets. He attached what he claims is an updated power of attorney, signed by you, dated 7 months ago. My throat tightened. And? I asked. The notary seal is valid, he continued, but the signature, it didn't match. I had my assistant pull the original POA filed with our office 3 years ago. It didn't match, signature, witness, even the font. It's a template from a download site. He let the words hang. Let them breathe. He used the old document to create urgency, he said. But without your explicit authorization, the court can't proceed. The hearing hasn't been approved yet. No, I whispered. They have set a hearing date, he said. October 14th. I looked at the calendar. Daniel had circled that date himself weeks before he died. I hadn't known why. Did he say I agreed? I asked quietly. He attached a note, Jacobson replied. Claimed you were emotionally unwell and did not wish to be burdened with financial decisions. He wrote that you verbally consented to proceed. I leaned against the desk, feeling the weight of everything. The deception, the trust, the responsibility now resting solely on me. The cold wood pressed against my hip, grounding me. I had never spoken the words aloud. Jacobson's voice softened slightly, but not enough to ease the tension. Then I need to ask plainly, he said. Has your son ever acted with your legal consent regarding this transfer? I glanced at Daniel's Parker pen on the desk. I could still see him holding it, signing checks with that fluid motion that seemed like calligraphy. I had once thought my silence meant agreement, that staying quiet meant I was consenting. But Jacobson didn't interrupt, he never did. Measured, deliberate. It's not consent, I said finally. Silence is just silence. I never said yes. I never gave him permission to act on my behalf. Then we'll need to move quickly, he replied. I nodded, almost forgetting he couldn't see me. We'll contest the submission, he continued, but you'll need to sign an affidavit. And we should talk about Daniel's grant fund. He listed you as the sole custodian. I closed my eyes. Daniel had always been careful, always ahead, yet clear in his intentions. Do you still have the original POA? I asked. I do. Filed, notarized, witnessed, he confirmed. Then let's use it, I said, the words carrying the finality of a stone dropped in water. Understood, Jacobson said. Will you come by tomorrow? Yes. First thing, I replied. We hung up without pleasantries. None were needed. I lingered a moment longer, the receiver resting against the sleeve of Daniel's coat. Then I retrieved a fresh notepad. I clicked the Parker pen to life and wrote in bold, deliberate letters, October 14th, I will be there. The coat still hung on the cedar closet door, carrying faint traces of cedar chips, cardamom, and the aftershave Daniel wore only on Sundays. I ran my hand over the thick, sturdy wool, stitched by him the winter he'd taken a tailoring class in his 60s just to prove he could learn something new. Above the left cuff, a tiny D was embroidered with uneven thread. He said it stood for December. I knew better. I slipped it on. The sleeves hung past my wrists. Slowly I turned each cuff twice and tied them in quiet, deliberate knots. Not bows, but knots with purpose. Daniel had always said, a knot only holds if you trust the tension. Perhaps that was what I needed now. A tension I could rely on. The house was quiet yet alive. A breeze drifted through the kitchen window, carrying the gentle clink of the wind chimes on the porch. Step by step I made my way back to the study. Daniel's desk remained as he left it. A half-finished crossword, his glasses beside a book on seed banks. A note in the margin reading, page 78, ask Eleanor. I didn't know the question. I just liked that he left a space for me there. I opened the left drawer, the one with the false bottom only he and I knew about. 2 taps along the edge, a press from underneath. There it was. The Parker pen, polished silver and black, resting across a folded linen cloth, waiting as if for its cue. Daniel had used that pen to sign every letter, every check, every donation. It felt heavier in my hand than I remembered. Next to it lay a slim brown folder, unmarked. I opened it carefully. Inside were our joint trust agreement, updated the year Adrian moved back home, Daniel's Ellis Research Endowment paperwork, the real power of attorney, notarized with my original signature, and a single photograph of the three of us, me, Daniel, and Adrian, taken on Adrian's graduation day. Daniel had drawn a small line under Adrian's name in pen. I hadn't noticed it before. I held the photograph for a moment, then turned it face down and tucked it safely inside. The documents went into a plain manila envelope, which I set aside. I opened another drawer, my drawer, and pulled out a slim rose-colored folder. Inside, I placed copies of every document I was taking and one I wasn't, the ALS fund. No one had mentioned it yet. Adrian probably didn't even know it existed. Daniel had named me sole custodian. The grant money remained untouched, waiting for the research proposal to be fully vetted. That fund wasn't about wealth or legacy. It was about Daniel. His mind, his fight, his quiet refusal to let illness take more than it already had. It would not become a bargaining chip in some courtroom. I closed the rose folder, sealed it with tape, and carried it down the hallway. I passed the linen cabinet, the old photographs of Daniel's parents, the sketch Adrian drew at 10 of my favorite tree. At the back of the house, I stepped into the small storage room. In the corner, behind Christmas decorations, sat an old recipe box. I pulled it forward, lifted the lid, and slid the rose folder beneath the recipes. Lid replaced, I paused, running my hand along the doorframe. This house, every room, every threshold, carried more than wood and paint. It carried memories, lessons, and reminders of endurance. Every hallway Daniel built, every door he reinforced after storms, every glance he asked me to hold steady during hard winters. I stepped back and closed the door softly, then made my way to the front of the house. The manila envelope rested on the bench beside my handbag. I picked it up, slid it inside, and zipped it shut. Before stepping outside, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Daniel's coat fit more like armor than clothing now. The sleeves knotted deliberately, shoulders squared. In my right hand, the Parker pen was clipped to a small notebook with the court date written in bold black ink. Outside, the morning air was sharp. Leaves crunched underfoot. Across the street, a mother tied her daughter's shoelaces. The world moved on indifferent. I stood on the top step, feeling the weight of this moment. This was my threshold. One step forward was for me. Not for Adrian, not for what others thought I could endure, but for what I had decided I would no longer accept. I stepped down and walked steadily forward. I arrived 6 minutes early. The receptionist looked up from her monitor, blinked, and said, "Meeting room B." "They're already inside." Of course they were. Adrian's favorite tactic. Arrive first, frame the room, project calm. I adjusted the knot on Daniel's coat sleeve, gave a firm squeeze to my handbag handle, and walked toward the glass doors. The corridor was silent, carpet muffling each footstep. I paused at the door. The metal handle was cold. Behind the frosted glass, I could make out 3 silhouettes: Adrian, his wife Chelsea, and Jacobson. I opened the door. All 3 looked up. Adrian rose, smoothly, almost casual. "Mom," he said as if this were a brunch meeting. "We weren't sure you'd." "I'm here," I said, letting the door close behind me. Adrian gestured toward a chair. "Why don't you sit? You must be tired." "No, thank you. I'll stand," I replied. His smile faltered just enough. Jacobson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Harris, thank you for coming," Jacobson began. "I thought you weren't aware of what's happening." A long pause followed. Even Chelsea shifted in her seat, uncomfortable. Adrian spoke first, voice soft, rehearsed. "Mom, this isn't an ambush. It's a discussion about the transition. We've been thinking about what's best for you, for your future." I tilted my head slowly. And you believe that future includes stripping me of decision-making authority over the estate your father and I built? He didn't flinch. You've always been practical. I thought if we could streamline things you could focus on rest, travel, whatever you wanted. I echoed the words slowly. If resting means being placed into a trust structure of my own assets while I'm still alive, I suppose I'm not tired yet. Adrian's lips parted, clearly not expecting resistance. Not here, not with Jacobson present. I set my bag down, unzipped it, and withdrew a manila folder. Calmly, I laid it on the table and opened it. Inside was the notarized power of attorney from 2020, signed with Daniel's pen with witnesses, and documented through our longtime legal office. I slid it toward Jacobson. His eyes narrowed, then widened. This is the original. Yes, I said firmly. And this is the only valid version. Everything filed after Daniel passed, especially the document Adrian submitted last month, is fabricated. Chelsea's eyes darted toward Adrian. He leaned forward. That's a serious accusation. Are you sure? Just that one word, I said quietly. Final. Quiet. Accurate. True. I turned to Jacobson. I had the digital records traced. The PA file submitted online to your office was uploaded from a masked IP address, routed through a server farm in Nevada, using a virtual machine. Jacobson blinked. That's highly specific. Because I hired someone who's precise, I said, looking at Adrian. And because you always underestimated metadata. His mouth opened, nothing came out. Jacobson leaned back, arms crossed. Adrian, do you have a response? I was told it was valid, Adrian started. Chelsea jumped in, voice hurried. We just wanted to simplify the estate, Mr. Jacobson. We didn't mean to. No, I interrupted quietly. You meant to erase me cleanly. Wiggly. So it wouldn't look like theft, just paperwork. Adrian's face reddened. That's not fair. What part? I said finally. The part where you forged documents. Or the part where you thought I wouldn't notice. No one spoke. I placed Daniel's Parker pen on the table between us. His initials glinted under the fluorescent light. This pen had signed every donation, every tuition check, every medical authorization. I touched the sleeve of his coat gently. He had said, I trust you to know what's worth protecting. Adrian looked away. Chelsea stared at the table. Jacobson picked up the original POA again, examined the seal, the signature, and exhaled. Well, he said, this changes things. Yes, I said. He turned to Adrian. If this is the true document of record, I am obliged to honor it. All proceedings based on the later submission are suspended. Adrian's voice lowered. Mom, I didn't mean for it to come to this. You wanted control, I said simply. And you thought I was too sentimental, too old, or too tired to stop you. He swallowed hard. I leaned forward. I was once afraid of being alone. That if I said no, I'd lose you too. But then I realized what I'd lose by staying silent was far worse. And there it was again, the quiet, unshakable truth. Silence. But this time it wasn't fear. It was clarity. I rose from my chair. This meeting is over. Mr. Jacobson, thank you for your time. I gathered Daniel's Parker pen, zipped my folder, and walked to the door. Adrian didn't follow. Chelsea didn't move. I didn't leave immediately. I asked Jacobson to stay behind for a few minutes. Adrian and Chelsea were already slipping out the side door, avoiding eye contact. Once the latch clicked behind them, I opened my bag again. This time I didn't pull a folder. I held a thick, worn envelope between my hands for a moment, then passed it across the table. Jacobson raised an eyebrow. What's this? Something you should have had 2 weeks ago, I said, but I needed to see if you'd ask the right questions first. He opened it slowly. Inside was a notarized affidavit, carefully prepared and signed by me. At the top, a statement of concern regarding the unauthorized power of attorney filing. Jacobson scanned the pages, pausing at an attachment stapled to the back. His brows furrowed. This is a transcript? Yes, I said calmly. A transcript from a recorded call between Adrian and a freelance notary in Henderson, Nevada. He tried to push things digitally, but the notary required verification. I intercepted that call legally through a third party before it reached your office. Jacobson looked up, paler than cautious. You're saying your son knowingly? Yes, I said evenly. He knowingly submitted falsified documentation to seize control of my estate, assuming I wouldn't notice or know how to respond. Jacobson leaned back. Mrs. Harris, You don't have to say it, I interrupted with a gentle wave. I need you to do something instead. I pulled out the original power of attorney and laid it beside a new document, a one-page letter of revocation I had prepared, signed, and witnessed. I would like to formally revoke all standing powers of attorney, effective immediately. From this moment no one, no family member, no agent, speaks on my behalf. All access is suspended. All authority terminated. I will handle the assets myself. Jacobson exhaled slowly, nodding. I can file this today. Good, I replied. And I'd like digital confirmation of the filing sent directly to my encrypted inbox. No printed copies, no CCs. He nodded again, scribbling notes. Then he paused. Do you want to pursue legal charges? I met his gaze, certain. No, I said. I want something stronger than punishment. He blinked. Stronger. Yes, I said, leaning in slightly. I want distance. I want restoration. And I want Adrian to feel the weight of being cut off. Not legally, not publicly, but personally. No courtroom can teach him what silence can. Jacobson remained quiet, only looking at me. Truly looking, as if recognizing the difference between a woman who is wounded and a woman who is awake. I could feel it in my chest, the shift. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. He cleared his throat. I'll handle everything on my end. I know you will, I said. I retrieved the Parker pen from my coat pocket and signed the revocation at the bottom, my handwriting deliberate, the same I used for school forms, medical waivers, and property deeds. Jacobson glanced at the signature and smiled faintly. That's steady, he said. I met his eyes, feeling the weight of the moment, the weight of clarity, and the first real sense of control I'd held in months. It had always been steady, just quiet. When I rose to leave, I didn't hurry. I tucked Daniel's Parker pen back into my pocket and buttoned the coat. Before opening the door, I turned once more. There's one more thing, I said. Jacobson looked up. The trust Daniel set up for ALS research. It's never been touched. I want it protected permanently. No changes, no movement, no signatures except mine. I'll assign a secondary trustee, but it won't be Adrian. It won't be family. Jacobson nodded. Understood. I added softly, and I don't want you to pity me. I don't, he said simply. I respect you. I gave a small smile, then stepped back into the corridor. The sound of my shoes on the polished floor echoed like footsteps I hadn't heard in years. I didn't return home after the meeting. Instead, I walked 2 blocks to the old library, the one Daniel and I had taken Adrian to as a child. He had loved the second-floor reading room, where the windows creaked in winter and the chairs whispered softly when shifted. The place was nearly empty that day, just how I needed it. I sat at one of the long oak tables and unzipped the flat envelope I had sewn into the lining of my coat shortly after Daniel passed. It wasn't the main pocket, not the inside flap. Just a hidden seam I had stitched shut myself. Inside was a manila folder, worn slightly at the corners but intact. Across the front, in Daniel's bold blue handwriting, it read, US Research Fund Legacy Draft. I hadn't looked at it in nearly a year, but I knew every line by heart. Daniel had written it during that quiet final winter after his diagnosis, before the machines, before everything changed. Practical, steady, not cold, just deliberate. I can't give them a cure, he had once said. But maybe I can make sure someone else gets closer. He never submitted the documents. He passed before the foundation partnership call could happen. I had left it to Adrian to handle. He said he would. But months later, when I asked, Adrian said, "We decided it's best to pause. The market's volatile. Better to consolidate first." The words sat wrong with me, but I said nothing until now. I laid the documents flat on the table. Financial breakdowns, research endowment structures, matching grant plans. Daniel had done it all. At the back, faded and paper-clipped, was a sticky note in his slanted handwriting. "If I don't make it, you will know what to do." I stared at it longer than I cared to admit. I opened my laptop, typed the encrypted portal address and began the transfer. The funds had been moved out of the general account just 6 weeks earlier. I assumed it was Adrian's doing, but he hadn't touched this portion. Not because he forgot, but because he didn't know it existed. I split the deposits, one to the family trust, one to a quiet holding account under my maiden name. The ALS seed fund remained untouched, safe, waiting. It took 43 minutes to complete the nonprofit consortium application Daniel had earmarked. They still existed, still accepted direct donor grants, still listed ALS-specific fellowships as priority research. I uploaded the documents, signed the letter of intent, scheduled the wire, and added a name to the permanent scholarship line. The Daniel Harris Endowment for ALS Research, honoring unfinished work. I didn't cry. Not until the confirmation email arrived at 2:47 p.m., time-stamped simply. Funds received. Activation pending board vote. I sat in the old wooden chair and let the quiet settle around me. It wasn't grief pressing down, it was a kind of peace. The kind that comes when something fractured finally finds its balance. My phone vibrated. A message from Chelsea. Just a single line. "Eleanor, please call when you can. Adrian is overwhelmed." I read it twice and then set the phone aside. Some lessons arrive late, some never come at all. But dignity, that is not negotiable. Daniel used to say, "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of leaving nothing that matters." And I had almost let that fear win. Almost. I placed the folder back in the envelope, folded Daniel's sticky note carefully, and tucked it behind my driver's license in my wallet. Every time I opened it, I would remember not just Daniel but myself. That evening, I returned home and made tea. Jasmine, his favorite. Wrapped in the gray coat Daniel had given me the year Adrian left for college, I sat on the porch, watching the wind move through the garden. The lilies needed trimming, the fence needed paint, but the legacy was no longer waiting. Holding the warm mug in my hands, I whispered softly to no one and everyone, "You left because they couldn't find a cure. But I won't let them destroy the part of you that stayed. Not your name, not your work, and not my voice." I rose. The chair scraped faintly against the polished wood floor. Adrian flinched at the sound. His lips parted like he was about to speak, but no words came. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I didn't mean to." Not even my name. I didn't give him a chance to find them. I gathered the documents into my satchel, deliberate and slow. The buckle clicked loudly in the quiet room. The sunlight had shifted. The conference room window framed the soft late afternoon, dust catching in muted gold light. I adjusted the strap across my shoulder and turned toward the door. Adrian moved slightly, half rising, mouth twitching as if to stop me. He finally said my name, soft and uncertain. Mom. I paused for half a breath, not to answer, just to feel it one last time. How easily the same word can lose its weight. Then I opened the door. The hallway outside was cool and dim, swallowing sound. My footsteps tapped steadily on the tiles. Not rushed, not hesitant, steady. I passed framed photos and certificates along the wall. Smiling law partners, a younger Jacobson shaking hands at a courthouse. None of it mattered. The echo of my steps followed me like a calmer version of myself. Halfway down, a receptionist glanced up, smiled politely, then returned to her work. Not a single person tried to stop me. Not a voice called me back. And that, strangely, was the closure I didn't know I needed. At the end of the hall, a glass door with a brass handle waited. The sun had warmed the metal and I felt it in my palm as I pulled it open. The threshold was just a small lip of marble, barely an inch high. Crossing it, I felt the weight of everything behind me. Not gone, just shifted. Behind that door stayed the version of me that doubted, that hesitated, that once believed silence was survival. That version did not step outside. Ahead, the sky had turned a late-day blue, the clear, crisp hue that only appears in early spring. The air had a crispness to it, sharp enough to wake the skin but not cruel. I adjusted the strap of my bag, pulled Daniel's coat closer around me and moved forward, not away. Returning to the house felt strange. Too quiet, too polished, as if no one had really lived here in months. The scent of wood polish lingered faintly, a ghost of effort. I slipped the coat off and hung it over the back of the kitchen chair. The chair across from it remained empty as it always did. I made myself a simple dinner. A boiled egg, a slice of toast, a few steamed carrots. Not because I needed it, but because anything more felt performative. Who was I cooking for now? The clock above the stove ticked with an authority I once reserved for courtroom judges. Every second a quiet accusation. I sat at the table, chewed, swallowed, stared at the empty chair and muttered, "This is what you wanted, Adrian." The words hung between me and the quiet. After a few more bites, I cleared the plate and washed it with more care than necessary. Then I turned toward the hallway closet we hadn't opened in months. Inside a worn cardboard box, the photo albums waited. I pulled out the one labeled Winter Holidays and carried it back to the table. Dust floated up as I opened the cover. Page after page, glittered reindeer, construction paper crafts, awkward handwriting. Then I found it, a card from when Adrian was 8. Green crayon tree on the front. Inside, a stick figure holding hands with a woman in a blue dress. MOM. I will always protect you. I promise. Love, Adrian. I traced the letters with my fingertip. The A in always was backward, but I remembered the night he made it. He'd overheard Daniel and me arguing over a hospital bill, burst in waving the card like a white flag and said, "When I grow up, I'll take care of you." I had believed him. Or perhaps I had wanted to. I turned the page. Another card from high school, a pencil sketch of our house. Caption: "Home is where Mom is." I closed the album and rested both hands on the cover as if I could hold a heartbeat there. What changed? Not the numbers, that's too simple. When did it shift? College. When he stopped coming home for Thanksgiving. The job. The wife. Or was it something quieter, like fog creeping beneath the door until one day the view disappeared altogether? I whispered into the empty kitchen, "Did you mean it, Adrian?" Silence answered as only silence can. Then another thought sharpened itself in my mind. Was it ever about protecting me, or was it about controlling me? Was I the person he loved, or the one he felt he needed to manage? I pushed the chair back and stood. My legs were stiff but not weak. I walked to the hallway mirror and looked at myself fully for the first time all day. Not just my reflection but the space I occupied. I looked like my mother, sharp around the eyes, soft along the jaw, tired but unbroken. I whispered again, this time to the woman staring back, "Don't confuse silence with consent, Eleanor." For the first time that day she nodded. I never saw exactly how Adrian sat in that office, but I've imagined it endlessly. Alone, surrounded by framed smiles that hadn't felt real in years. A photo of our family at Yellowstone. Daniel strong, protective. Adrian small enough to ride on his father's shoulders. Innocence still intact. Another memory from his wedding. Too stiff, too posed. Adrian's smile didn't quite reach his eyes that day. Maybe it was the way his assistant hesitated outside the frosted glass office door, hand lingering as if afraid to break a fragile silence. Or maybe she didn't even sense it. Maybe she just followed protocol. When she finally stepped in, she might have said something casual. "Everything all right, Mr. Harris?" I imagine Adrian didn't answer right away. His hand rested on a manila folder. The same one from the recent meeting, now stripped of all leverage, all manipulation. She shifted, awkward, and tried again. "Has it been settled with your mother?" He gave her a tight, measured nod, but no words. How could he? The person who had taught him trust was the same one now holding firm boundaries he couldn't bend. When she left, I picture him slowly turning toward the window, hands resting in his lap, his breathing shallow, the weight of something nameless pressing against his chest. And maybe, just maybe, he reached for the leather wallet he never replaced, the one I had given him for college graduation. Inside, a faded photo of me at a farmer's market holding a basket of peaches, laughing. He must have been 10 when he took it. He told me he kept it there, just in case. Just in case of what? I like to think he lingered over it longer than necessary, noticing the silver glint of my hair in the sun, the lines around my eyes that were carved by laughter, not exhaustion. And I imagine the hesitation, the pause, not from guilt but from recognition. He felt known even now, even after everything. Carefully he slid the photo back into the wallet, not in the visible slot this time, but tucked behind old receipts, buried with things too inconvenient to confront. That's how regret begins, not in flames but in filing cabinets. You don't erase the past. You hide it, hoping not to see it, but never truly discard it. I picture him returning to his desk, typing another email, leading another meeting, tied too tight, voice too calm. The hollow in his chest had only grown. Because the weight of what you take is never lighter than the weight of who you lost. The folding chairs were already half filled when I arrived at the library that morning. A few women sat stiffly, hands clasped, eyes darting as though waiting for permission to exhale. Some wore freshly pressed blouses. Others threadbare sweaters. Yet all carried the same quiet weight in their eyes, one I recognized immediately. I stacked the handouts at the front of the room, simple flyers printed in black ink. If they say, "Let me handle it, Mom," you ask, with whose money? A free class on reclaiming financial dignity, taught by someone who learned the lessons the hard way. I had written that tagline myself. 4 hours for the words, a lifetime for the meaning. This wasn't a lecture. It was a conversation, one most of them had never been invited to before. I cleared my throat and began. "My name is Eleanor Harris. I'm not a banker. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a widow who once believed silence was safer than asking questions. Until I realized that silence can carry a heavy cost." A few women in the room smiled faintly, others lowered their eyes to their laps. One older woman with silver-streaked hair and a slow, deliberate nod looked at me as though I'd just named a weight she'd been carrying for years. I passed around a printed sheet titled 10 Questions to Ask Before Signing Anything. We talked about power of attorney, trusts, warning signs that aren't delivered in envelopes, when your name vanishes from your own bank account, or when grown children tell you, "You don't need to worry about that." A woman in the second row raised her hand. She wore a pale scarf, practical shoes, and a cautious look. "What if the accounts are already gone?" she asked. I met her gaze. "Then we find out where they went and we start again." Her lips pressed together. "And what if the person who took them is your own child?" The energy in the room shifted, a quiet tremor passing among those present. I let the silence stretch, then spoke softly. "I know that ache. It isn't just about money, is it? It's about feeling like your voice was treated like clutter. Something they could clear away when convenient. Something they meant to sweep aside." She blinked rapidly and I nodded once, slowly. "We start again anyway." After the class, a few women lingered. One handed me a tin of lemon cookies. Another asked for help scanning old documents. Then a woman with gray curls and a cane approached. Her voice was gentle but firm. "Did you win?" she asked. "Against whoever tried to take it from you?" I smiled. Not the triumphant kind, but the kind that means clarity. "Legally, yes," I said. "Emotionally, I'm still learning." She reached out and held my hand. "Then, did you ever forgive them?" The question hung in the air like a fragrance too delicate to rush. I met her eyes and told the truth. I forgave myself first. She held my gaze, nodded silently, tucked my flyer into her purse, and left into the mellow glow of the late afternoon sun. By the time I returned home, the light had begun to dip low. I wrote slowly, deliberately. Each word carried its own weight, arriving without defense, without judgment, just presence. The kind I once hoped Adrian would offer me when my hands shook pouring tea, or when I forgot the name of the little bird that nested by our window every spring. I folded the letter carefully, in thirds, not for precision but with intention. The envelope remained blank on the outside, carrying only the weight of words unspoken. I opened the hall closet with its familiar creaky hinge and retrieved an old blue tin. Walter had bought lemon shortbread cookies from the bakery on Linden Street every spring. When Adrian was 10, he discovered the tin and asked, "Can I keep my treasures in here?" We had let him. Back then he thought bottle caps and baseball cards could change the world. I pressed the lid shut, held the tin against my chest, and then picked up a small garden trowel. The evening air was crisp, nearly still, filled only with the faint hum of crickets and the slow breath of early autumn. I walked to the side yard, past the fence, past the corner where Walter had planted sunflowers each year, even after his back stiffened. The Dallin Huang was in bloom. It sent a quiet memory. I never knew its English name, perhaps hyacinth, but Walter loved it, always saying it smelled like hope. Even after I stole his voice, he would lean toward them each spring, eyes closed, drawing strength from something no illness could touch. I knelt slowly, knees protesting like old hinges, and brushed aside the loose mulch. Beneath it, the soil was damp, soft, welcoming. A small patch of the world where care, patience, and memory could still take root. I dug until the hole was just deep enough, just wide enough. Then I leaned close and whispered, not to the earth but to the air itself. "If one day you find your way back, Adrian, you'll know where to start." I lowered the small tin into the soil, covered it with care, and pressed the dirt flat with the palms of my hands. Sitting back, I let the sky wash over me in shades of orange and violet, the kind of sunset that doesn't demand notice but offers quiet beauty for anyone willing to see. I stayed there, still and silent. I didn't cry. I didn't practice any imagined conversation that would never arrive. I simply breathed. The letter inside the tin asked for nothing. No apology, no reunion, no acknowledgement. It only held the truth, that I had once loved a boy who made handmade Christmas cards, who promised he would always protect me, who believed I was the safest place on earth. Somewhere along the path to manhood, he had started believing that protection meant possession. It took me a long time to realize it wasn't about me. It was fear, ambition, and a world that whispers to sons, If you don't seize control, someone else will. The letter ended simply, I am still your mother, but now I am also mine. That doesn't erase you. It saves me. I brushed the dirt from my knees and stood. As I turned back toward the house, I felt a subtle shift. Not in the garden, not in the air, but inside me. I hadn't buried grief. I had planted closure. And whether or not it ever blossomed into forgiveness, it had a root, a beginning. I stepped inside, breathing in the faint scent of hyacinths, carrying with it the fragile promise of hope. The next morning, the library hall smelled faintly of old paper and lemonwood polish. I was finishing the setup for the 10 a.m. class. 7 folding chairs in a loose circle, a picture of water on the side table, and a stack of handouts titled Financial Clarity After 50. Your voice still matters. As I adjusted the curtains to let in more light, movement caught my eye near the entryway. A man stood at the bulletin board, his back to me, still yet not rigid. There was a subtle tension, a quiet attempt at invisibility. He wore a charcoal gray suit, neat, understated, the kind that suggests care without pride. His hair was grayer than I remembered, his frame slightly thinner. But I knew that posture, those hands. One reached for a flyer, the green one with bold letters. If they say, let me handle it, asked gently. With whose money? He read it carefully, then folded it with deliberate care, slipping it into his inner pocket. He didn't turn around. His glance barely reached the room, never meeting my eyes. I didn't call out his name, not anger, not fear, simply understanding. Some healing doesn't need words. Silence isn't distance, it's space. He lingered a moment longer, then nodded once toward the bulletin board, toward the air between us, and walked away. No chair was taken. No words offered. No performance of remorse or redemption. Yet he had come. That was enough. The door clicked shut behind him. I didn't cry. Instead, I approached the spot where he had stood. The bulletin board still held 3 more flyers. I smoothed their edges gently, as if straightening corners could somehow make the message clearer, the lesson quieter, and the weight of unspoken truths just a little lighter. A few minutes after the last student had left, one of the women lingered near the doorway. Everything all right, Eleanor? She asked. I nodded, adjusting the sunlight spilling across the handouts. We began again. That day's lesson was about trusts and when it's time to revoke them, but there was laughter between the explanations. There's a relief in naming the things that once shamed you, in realizing that the fault was never truly yours to carry. After the session, when the room had emptied and silence returned, I lingered in my chair. I let myself replay the moment quietly. No dramatic confrontations, no courtroom tension. Just this. A man, my son, pausing in front of a public bulletin board, reading a flyer I had posted quietly without anyone demanding his presence. That was enough. Closure doesn't have to shout. It can arrive in small gestures, in someone showing up unannounced with nothing but their hands in their pockets and a piece of paper held close. Later that week, Lily appeared on my porch. She was wrapped in an oversized hoodie, clutching a worn composition notebook as if it contained the world's secrets. Her sneakers tapped nervously against the wooden step, but her face lit up when she saw me. Miss Harris, do you have a moment? She asked. I smiled. Of course. Come in. She followed me into the sunroom, where the late afternoon light drew gentle patterns across the floorboards. I set the kettle on and motioned for her to sit. Lily was 17, maybe 18, and lived 3 houses down. I had watched her escort her younger brother to school countless mornings. She carried herself with a quiet alertness, a sort of careful grace that reminded me of myself at that age. She opened her notebook, revealing the flyer from my class. I don't have a retirement account or anything, she admitted, but I've been trying to make my paycheck stretch. I want to help my mom, but I don't want to feel like I'm drowning before I even start. I nodded, listening. There was a mixture of apology and defiance in her voice, as though asking for guidance was already something she felt she might not deserve. We began with the basics: income, fixed costs, variable expenses, the envelope method. She wrote carefully in neat blue letters. When we reached the section labeled Essentials, I asked, "Who do you think of first when you spend money?" She tapped her pen against the page, then wrote, "Mom, groceries, prescriptions, bus fare. School shoes. Rent. Me books, toothpaste, socks." My eyes lingered on that fourth line and she noticed. "Is that wrong?" she asked. "No," I said gently, "but can I show you something?" I slid the notebook toward me and circled the word me, drawing an arrow not to the bottom but to the top. Beside it I wrote 0, stability, peace, rest, choice. Her eyes widened slowly, as if seeing her own needs ranked so high felt alien. "I used to forget to put myself first too," I said softly. "When I was younger, even when I was older, I thought strength meant giving everything away." "What changed?" she asked. I smiled, folding the edge of her page back carefully. "Life taught me that strength isn't measured by how much of yourself you give away, but by how gently you choose to keep what matters." We sat in silence as the kettle hissed softly. Neither of us cried, but the stillness in the room carried a quiet understanding. Two generations separated by decades, learning the same lesson: how to put yourself back on the page without guilt, without fear, and with intention. Before she left, Lily paused at the doorway and asked softly, "Do you think it's selfish to want to feel safe?" I looked at her and smiled gently. "No," I said. "It's brave." The kettle sang quietly in the kitchen, its old familiar note gentle, like a memory softened by time. I reached for the porcelain teapot Daniel had given me on our 25th anniversary, ivory with faint blue roses, a tiny chip on the spout, earned in a move we never intended to make. I had never replaced it. Some things remain precious precisely because they bear their imperfections. I placed a single cup on the tray and poured the hot water over the Earl Grey leaves, watching the steam curl upward, almost reverent, almost sacred. I carried the tray to the small table by the window, opening the pane to let in the crisp early morning air. The sky hovered between gray and gold, uncertain, as if waiting for a gentle nudge to decide. A single bird dared the stillness with a cautious call. I sat and cradled the warm cup in my hands, feeling its heat seep into my fingers. Across the street, a young mother adjusted her baby's hat before settling him in the stroller. Her coat was worn, frayed at the hem, but her hands moved with calm assurance. I smiled quietly, unseen. There were years when I could not sit alone without feeling like I had failed someone. Now, silence carried presence rather than absence. Daniel had once said that everyone needs a small ritual to remind themselves that they belong to themselves. This was mine. Tea, an open window, a deep breath, a whispered prayer not to any particular god, but to whatever part of the universe still listened when no one else would. I closed my eyes and murmured softly, "If there is anyone out there tonight who has been overlooked, dismissed, or made to feel invisible, if there is someone who has given endlessly and now wonders what is left, may they find this story. Not for its grandeur but because it is real. And real still matters." I let the words hang, then set the cup down and picked up my notebook, its spine worn, pages thin, faintly scented of cedar and dust. The last entry was weeks old, but today felt different. I wrote slowly, deliberately. Freedom is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like a quiet cup of tea poured for one. Sometimes it sounds like a woman learning to take in her own breath. Sometimes it feels like walking through a door without turning back. Not because the past has vanished, but because what lies ahead finally makes sense. I set the pen beside the cup. The sky had begun to shift, blue seeping gently into gray, like someone opening their eyes after a long rest. I thought of Adrian, not with anger, not with longing, but with the calm acceptance that some things will never be what we wish them to be. And that was enough. I thought of Lily too, and her penciled budget, her quiet question, "Is it selfish to feel safe?" I smiled again. "No, Lily. It's sacred." I sipped the tea, letting its warmth settle. And for the first time since Daniel had passed, I whispered, not to him, not to the wind, but to myself, "I am still here. I still count." And if you are listening, wherever you are, if you've ever doubted your worth because someone overlooked you, if you've felt your voice vanish or your name forgotten, you are seen and you still matter. Let this be a gentle reminder. You are not forgotten. You are the page someone has been waiting to read. You are the cup that refills itself. You are not too late, and you are never truly alone. If this story reaches you, hold it close. And if it gives you courage, pass it on. Maybe someone else is standing quietly at their own threshold, unsure if it's safe to step forward. Perhaps this is the sign they've been waiting for. I am Eleanor Harris. I am not Adrian's mother in the way I once defined it. I am not Daniel's wife in the way the world marked me. I am Eleanor. And I am the one who signed the final document, the one that closed the chapter with dignity. There is a strange peace in releasing the roles that never contained your full self. I once believed motherhood was the sum of who I was. I once believed being a wife meant my own needs were secondary, and that saying yes quietly was the way to preserve love. Now I understand. Love is not measured in silence. Consent is not assumed. Dignity, even when overlooked, can be reclaimed quietly with simple intentional acts. A door softly closed, a letter sent at last, a life gently rewritten. If you've stayed with me this far, I hope you feel this too. Hear this clearly, because it is a message I needed when I was younger. You are not defined by the roles others assign you. You are not the mistake they wish to erase. You are not a ledger to be balanced, nor a plan someone else controls. You are not too old, too fragile, too late. You are a name. And your name deserves to be spoken with care. My name is Eleanor. And I sign this final page not in sorrow, not in anger, but in completeness. The woman who endured, the woman who let go, the woman who learned, the woman who lived. The screen fades to black. Silence first, then a soft, warm swell like a memory settling into rest. And over that quiet, a voice. Not mine, not Adrian's, not Daniel's. Just words reaching out to you. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever realized you were the one managed rather than the one protected? Tell us your story. And before we part, let us know where you are reading this. Is it a calm morning with a cup of tea, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Every comment is read with gratitude. If this story touched you, consider subscribing. Not just to hear more stories, but to join a community that still believes in healing, in kindness, in second chances. Thank you for spending these moments here. May this story linger with you like a note folded into your coat pocket, like a quiet voice saying, "You matter." Sometimes the miracle doesn't knock. It waits patiently until you are ready to open your heart. Take care. We'll see you next time.